Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atukura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei Māori ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hare mai ki tēnei hui. Te iwi o rangatane, tēnā koutou. Nā konihera I Papauia, tēnā koutou. E nā mana e nā reo, nā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. So welcome everybody to this meeting of Community Development Committee for the 8th of June. I'm Lorna Johnson, the Chair, and I have Rosa, the Administrator, Sarah, Claridge, our Advisor, and the Assistant Chief Executive, Cheryl Bryant, to my left, and the Acting Chief Executive to her left. So the meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on Council's YouTube channel. Health and safety, since we have some visitors in the chamber, we'll show on the display screen, but basically if you can note the emergency exits, which are there and that way, and our meeting place, if we need to meet, is the clock tower in Te Maraeohine. It's a no smoking building. There's a defibrillator located on the ground floor, and if there are any near miss or incidents, please report to the committee administrators. Thanks. So in terms of the COVID-19 protection framework, we're in orange setting, and so we're just asking people to follow the public hygiene measures for that. Masks are optional in the council chamber at the moment. If you're an online participant, if you can keep your camera turned on and your microphone muted unless addressing the meeting. And councillors in person will be using the voting devices, and councillors online will be voting in the chat. And if you are speaking, if you can give your name before speaking and use the microphone, especially for presenters, so that the people online can hear, that would be great. So we will move into apologies. I have apologies from the Mayor, Grant Smith, on council business, from Councillor Rachel Bowen, from Councillor Lou Finlay, and from the Deputy Mayor for late arrival. Are there any other apologies? Okay. No. Okay, well, I'd like to move that the apologies be accepted. Seconded, Councillor Hancock. And we'll just take this one on the hands, please. So all those in favour? Councillors online, can you just vote using your hand? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. So the next item is additional items, and I have not had any notified to me. Item 3 is declarations of interest, and I believe there are some declarations of interest. So if Councillor Beattie.
I have an interest in item 6 as I'm chair of the DLC and wish to remain independent on that.
Thank you. That's noted. I believe the Deputy Mayor has indicated also an interest in item 6, which we will note. She isn't here to say it for herself. Thank you. Now, public comment. We have...
Madam Chair, sorry, Danielle Harris had her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Danielle, did you?
Thank you. I just note an interest as the chair of Te Tihi for the sector lead paper.
Thank you. That's thank you, Danielle. That's noted. So, well, that brings us on to public comment, and so we have public comment from Kerry Hockard from the Cancer Society. Kerry, you know the system very well, but you'll have 3 minutes for public comment, and if you can stick to that time, that would be great. So you're very welcome to start when you're ready. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Today I ask your support for the Smoke-Free 2025 Action Plan, the vaping remit proposed by Kaipara District Council for LGNZ AGM, and Dr. Nikki Jackson's advocacy to reduce alcohol-related harm. Dame Tariana Turia once said, "The story and history of tobacco are reflected in our urapa, our burial places." The Smoke-Free 2025 Action Plan launched last year gives a meaningful way to address tobacco-related harm. The goal of Smoke-Free 2025 has already been endorsed by this council. You are leaders nationally with your strong smoke-free and vape-free policy, implementation plan and funding to make this vision a reality. The role of local government is crucial in creating smoke-free environments. The plan will legislate to reduce the number of tobacco retailers, prevent tobacco retailers being in our most deprived neighbourhoods, reduce nicotine levels in smoked tobacco to help break the hold of tobacco, and see a smoke-free generation forming, for there is no safe age to start smoking. Ministry of Health expect the amended legislation, the Smoke-Free Environments and Regulated Products Bill, to have its first reading in Parliament later this month, with submissions called for in early July. I ask you to write a submission. I ask that you also support the Kaipara District Council remit proposed for this year's LGNZ AGM. This remit grew out of growing concern about the number of retailers selling vape products, a concern many share across our region. This remit requests the government to restrict the sale of vaping products to R18 specialist vape stores and develop proximity limits to prevent the clustering of vaping product retailers. Lastly, the Cancer Society supports Dr. Nikki Jackson's request that you support Chloe Swarbrick's bill addressing alcohol-related harm. Alcohol is readily available, affordable, widely promoted in the media. It's in our neighbourhoods and particularly in low-income areas. Yet it's a Class 1 carcinogen and a known cause of cancer. Council policies and Chloe Swarbrick's bill addressing alcohol availability, affordability and marketing make possible ways to equitably reduce consumption and reduce alcohol-related harm. So let's continue to put the health and well-being of our community at the heart of our decision-making. Please add your support. Say yes to addressing the harms caused by tobacco and alcohol. Thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. That's great. Excellent timing. I'm happy to open for questions if any elected members have questions. I have one. So you asked us to support the Smoke-Free Environments Bill. Is that just a general support? Do we not know precisely what the content of that bill is at the moment?
No, at this stage, unfortunately, we don't know what the format of that's going to look like. We've just been challenged with just raising awareness, trying to recruit support. It could be general support, it could be a letter of support from this council, or it could be actually writing a submission to the plan. But the problem is, as you say, at this stage we don't know what that consultation process is going to look like, what questions are going to be asked about the bill. So this is, but I'm also very aware that the council's not meeting again in July, so we've got a very tight time frame.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions online? Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kerry, for coming in and talking to us today. I just had a question around with the sort of restrictions on vaping and vape stores, really. Is the idea that we would restrict them in the way that we restrict alcohol with sort of the liquor license type regulations. Is that what we're aiming for? What the Cancer Society is aiming for?
What we'd really like to see is that vaping products be restricted to R18 specialist vape stores, and also going alongside that it would mean that people would get the quit advice and the support they actually need to help them quit smoking. I mean, vaping was never ever designed for people to use other than if you were a smoker trying to quit. But what we're seeing now, unfortunately, is huge growth in the number of young people who've never smoked who are now using vape products instead. And because of the nicotine levels in them, they're actually on a pathway to addiction.
So just to follow up on that, would you be looking at restricting, or would you be recommending restricting the amount of vape shops available in the city as well? Or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dingwall. Councillor Barrett, you're in the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a question for staff in relation to the public comment.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Just following up as well, thank you for your comment, Kerry. My understanding from staff is they're potentially limited around capacity to prepare a submission to the amendment bill addressing tobacco, and just wanted to get that clarified as to whether or not there was intent and capacity within staff.
Okay, I'll pass over to the Assistant Chief Executive.
Probably in terms of capacity, that's probably a question best posed to the Chief Planning Officer, but I'm also looking at Peter Ridge, who is here as a Senior Policy Advisor in the regulatory area, who may be able to actually comment on the work program of the regulatory policy staff. But in terms of any forward action, staff, if there's capacity, depending on Peter's answer, can keep an eye on any input into any action plans, and also look at what submission could be brought through this council if it was going to select committee.
Through you, Madam Chair. As has been mentioned, the scope of the bill is still undetermined, so it is hard to gauge how much work would be required. It also depends on perhaps what the nature of the advocacy you'd be envisaging. A general letter of support, fairly straightforward. Detailed analysis of a bill that's as yet unknown is a bit more resource intensive. Yeah.
Great, thank you. That's helpful to understand.
Thank you. Peter, while you're there, do you need direction from the committee to do either a letter of support or a submission?
I think our process, and possibly the Assistant Chief Executive can answer that one, but I think generally we would prefer direction, but it may be possible to do it through the Chief Executive.
If I can answer that through the Chair, so we probably don't need direction in terms of putting a submission, because that would come back through Council anyway. But I think if there was a letter of support, that would go over the Mayor, and I think that would be appropriately to be resolved through the committee so that we've got that strength of recommendation behind it.
Okay, so if I'm interpreting the answers correctly, we'd need to put up a recommendation today. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your public comment today. Did I understand you correctly about the remit to local government from Kaipara District Council? Was that for this?
Yeah.
Okay.
For this year's AGM, yeah,
okay.
LGNZ AGM.
Can I just, through you, Madam Chair, through to the officers, because last council meeting we had two remits that we considered, Hutt City and New Plymouth, and that wasn't one of them. Can I just get an update? Is there other remits that we haven't considered as a city?
I'll pass over to the Assistant Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are remits that will go through to Local Government New Zealand. They get there either through support of councils, 5 councils, or through a metro sector or provincial sector meeting or a zone meeting. So those two remits were brought here to give direction to the Mayor in terms of how he might vote. He does have a delegation in terms of voting on remits at Local Government New Zealand. So not every remit that's proposed for Local Government New Zealand is coming through Council.
Okay, that's helpful for the context, but thank you. I wasn't aware of that at the time.
Thank you. Don't think there are any further questions, so thank you very much, Kerry, for your public comment.
Yeah, just to add, the Cancer Society, any bit of information that I receive, I'll be forwarding straight away to the council to help with the submission process. And the Cancer Society is presently working on a template submission, so I'll make sure that we pass that on as well, in the hope that it will assist and there won't be any barriers to the submission writing. So thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. So I'd like to move that the committee receive the presentation for information, and I've also got an additional recommendation that the administrators are typing up, that the committee direct the CE to provide either a letter of support or a submission on the Smoke-Free Environments Bill. And I see that Councillor Dingwall is happy to second that. So, Councillor Dingwall, are you happy to second the first recommendation as well? I think that was a yes before the screen disappeared on me. So if I could just get the Assistant Chief Executive to just comment on the wording of the additional recommendation, if you're comfortable with that. Yeah, okay, thank you. So just briefly to speak to these, in terms of the letter of support or submission, I feel confident that we as a council support the goal of a smoke-free community, and everything we've done in terms of policy and directions and providing smoke-free environments supports that. So I don't think it's particularly controversial to say that we will likely support the Smoke-Free Environment Bill, but while we don't have the specifics of what's involved, and we're likely to be not meeting in July when this is going to be required, I mean, I'm happy to delegate through the Chief Executive that either a letter of support or a submission be provided, just so that there's no doubt about our intent as a council. So I'll open up if there's any comment. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate, Kerry, your continued advocacy for health and in particular better control over the harm that tobacco causes in our community. Certainly supportive of the intent of the recommendation. I would like to see it clarified to be the specific name of the bill, which is a little bit more of a mouthful, but it specifically indicates that this is the smoked tobacco phase. We've already dealt with the vaped phase about 2020, so I can send that through by email if that's helpful to amend that way.
I'll just check with the
Or I
administrator.
can read it out.
Yeah, if you can send it through by email, that would be great. Thank you. We do want to get it right. I was working a little bit on the fly there, so yep, thank you. Okay, thanks, Kerry. Okay, so Councillor Barrett's sending that through so we get the correct name of the bill. Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I feel this is getting quite political and I don't want to support the second item. I will support the first one. Not that I am anti-smoke-free. I am supporting the smoke-free environment, but not wanting to support the submission. So just if we can separate the two, that would be great. Thank you.
That's no problem. We can separate them out. Councillor Dingwall. Councillor Dingwall, we can't hear you just at the moment. Okay, do you want to try again now?
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am quite happy to support this direction, mainly because it is one of our goals to to be a smoke-free city. And it has concerned me a bit of just the sheer amount of vape shops as well that has been popping up left, right and centre. And it's been hard to know what we can actually do to sort of reduce the harm and the exposure of that. There was a vape shop that just appeared in my neighbourhood, which is a very quiet sort of suburban area. And that took quite a lot of us by surprise. And so I think if there was more direction coming from government as well on, yes, practical things to kind of make sure that we limit exposure of products like vape products and cigarettes to the public and particularly children, that would be good. So I'm quite happy to support this. And I do, it's not a political thing. It's just you know, looking after the health of our community thing. So I urge everyone to support it.
Thank you. Danielle Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Kerry, for your submission. From an iwi perspective, we're 150% behind the submission. Obviously, over generations, we've seen the impact of what smoking has done to our whānau. We do have major concerns as well around vaping and the number of vape shops in the city, and we're really not going to know the implications of what vaping is for a number of years, just like we didn't know for smoking. So fully supportive of raising the ages, because we know from our own mahi in the whole water space that so many of our young people are taking up vaping as a fad, and it does become an addiction once you bring the tobacco mix in. So fully supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? No one online? Okay, thank you. I don't think I need a right of reply, so we will just get the recommendation back up on the screen so that we can all see it, and I'll read it out. So we'll take. Do you want to take this one first? Okay, so we'll take the first recommendation first, which is that the committee resolves that the public comment be received for information. So if you can vote on that with a show of hands, all in favour? And we'll just check the people online. Thank you. That is carried unanimously. And now we'll go to the additional recommendation. If we can just pop that on the screen, please. Okay, so that's that the committee resolves that the committee direct the Chief Executive to provide either a letter of support or a submission to the Smoke-Free Environment and Regulated Products (brackets Smoke Tobacco) Amendment Bill, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dingwall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And those online. Thank you. That is carried with one vote against. So we will move on now to item 5, which is a presentation from the Manawatu Multicultural Council. And I'd like to invite the President of the Manawatu Multicultural Council, Nina Kirschbaum, Angel Kwan, the Treasurer, and February Sahato, Committee Member, to make the presentation to us. Thank you. So if you could just make sure your microphones are on. So if you just click the little bar so that you get a green light. Yep, thank you. And then you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation and then questions. Did you have a PowerPoint that you wanted putting up?
I'm already sending it to
Okay, yeah, we'll just wait just a second till we get that presentation up then. Thank you. Okay, that's great. Now you should have the little controller in front of you. Just check it's working. Okay. Right, when you're ready, thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora, everyone.
Yeah, I think, Nina, sorry, you're going to have to pull the microphone a bit closer and maybe speak up a wee bit. Is your light on the microphone?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you.
So, my name is Nina. I'm from the Manawatu Multicultural Council, and today we're going to present you about what the MMC has been doing the last 2 years. So MMC have been operating now within Palmy for almost 30 years, providing an essential point of contact for new migrants, refugees, and newcomers to the city. Where we are now, now we have 9 staff. We used to be only have 1 service manager and 1 admin, but now we have 1 service manager, 1 admin, 1 project manager, 5 community connectors, and 1 welcoming school coordinators. At the moment, we have a 3 big project, which is the community connection project, where the aim is to provide connection and direct support to people so they can access information and services in the community. And with the COVID-19, we also are supporting the SIQ, the self-isolation quarantine people, support for the service and the case referrals. And the navigation project, where we engage and navigate the ethnic communities to understand and respond to the COVID-19 effects. And the Welcoming School project is the new project, is a pilot project that we, to support the students, parents, and school in Palmerston North to create a more culturally inclusive and welcoming school. Next. There's some of the statistics that we took from 2006 and 2018. You can see that's how we are growing as well. And we did the research within the community, especially within the community leaders. And most of the community voices that the need for a welcoming multicultural hub for the ethnic communities and the absence of culturally appropriate spaces in the city for ethnic communities. There's, now, this is where we want to be, that we would like to have the multicultural community hub as a welcoming public space. We're having a vision of kind of like office with a space for a team of approximately 12, and where there's a building with a community hall for approximately 150 people, where's the meeting rooms, where the classes now, because we have 7 different language classes that we held at the MMC, where we have multicultural youth space. We would like to have the community kitchen where the community can do the cooking demonstration and any other activities within the community kitchen, and multicultural play area, where we also thinking of having another multicultural play group that we used to have, and the cultures area, where we would like to, the cultures area is kind of like having a display of different culture from different communities.
So following from Nina's amazing presentation about the growth in Manawatu Multicultural Council, I would like to present a little bit about the SWOT analysis. So as we can see, the strength, we have 58 diverse ethnic groups as members. We also have strong partnership with City Council and other government agencies. We have experience serving communities for almost 30 years. The opportunities are Multicultural Hub will address the needs of diverse ethnic communities in Palmerston North, branding and positioning Palmy as a welcoming city. attractions of talents and economic development, support from refugees' families, growing number of multicultural populations, so increasing population could use the community center. The weakness is that there are limited funding and inclusive space. The threats is expectations from the ethnic communities and lack of sustainable funding. So that's all from us. Thank you very much. Is there any questions?
Thank you, February and Nina. Thank you, that's great. I'll just open up for questions now. So first up, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my first question, I think, Nina, for you guys would be, as a community organisation, what are some of the challenges that you face, or that you're facing at the moment?
The challenge?
The challenges that you're facing at the moment that you're probably willing to let us know.
Yeah, so the last 2 years, we've gained 20 new membership within MMC, so now we have over 50. And then the challenges is that we don't have enough space. Okay. So every time when the community, wanted to have their own meeting for their needs, and you guys know that we are the Hancock Community House, and with the it's just kind of like fighting over booking, as well as because we have the language classes as well. So there's a challenge that we are facing at the moment.
Cool. I think my follow-up question, if I may, Madam Chair, would be, you talked about the absence of a culturally appropriate space for ethnic communities, and you've shown through your slides of a community hub. Where is this being, what are the initial thoughts that have been put forward in terms of like the building, location, that sort of thing that you guys are thinking?
Well, the vision is, so what we would like is that for our proposal to have the multicultural hub to to be included in the, the 10 years, the civic and cultural precinct. And it's within the city. So kind of like what we have envisioned is kind of like a building with a two levels, where the top level is for offices and classes, and at the bottom is a community, community kitchen, and then the meetings room and the event, the community hall where the community can use it for the events.
One more question, Madam Chair. Yeah, sure. You mentioned also that you are in communication, and you have relationships with the council and other government agencies. Other than the Ministry of Ethnic Affairs and MSD, what are other agencies that you guys have been in contact with or in relation with?
So we also with the DIA,
yeah,
and then with the MBIE, and Ting Haura. Yeah,
cool. And where does the bulk of funding come from?
Well, at the moment, MSD is the biggest funding that we receive at the moment. There was since early 2021, and that's where the community connection project's coming from. That's where we managed to have those 4 connectors out of the MSD fund, because there's a community connection project, and then 1 connector is from the MBIE fund.
Sure. One more question, Madam Chair, if I may. In relation to that culturally appropriate space, because I know that there are many different ethnic groups meeting there and that sort of thing, how would you mitigate, let's say, meeting the needs of different cultural groups? Because different cultural groups will have different culturally appropriate sort of things, or ideals, or and that sort of thing. How would you manage that in that space, in that environment, where you have many different ethnic groups and at the same time being culturally appropriate in terms of practice and meeting the needs of all those communities?
You mean at the moment?
Yeah, or even with the community hub that you're thinking?
Well, that's why we're thinking of the community hub, because if we have those enough space, so basically each community, if they need some space, to book or something like that, there's always room for them, right? And then at the moment also, we do have a booking system, kind of like which group from our members that needing the space, needing for the meeting, needing for the classes and all stuff like that. So we do have the schedule. And also additional to that, now we are hiring extra space for MMC, and then it will be started in 2 weeks' time. On the 15th, we're gonna have the extra space, the extra office for the extra staff that we are having. So that's how we desperately, needing it for client to come, to help having the confidentiality talk with the community connector and all stuff like that, as well as for the activities, because within those buildings, they have a big event room that we can also hire for the community needs.
And adding a little bit to your question, things that we have been running that was a success is our potluck dinner that was celebrated with different cultures. So that's again bringing and celebrating different cultures. It is like we kind of pause it because of COVID, but we're hoping in the new hub we can run more like that, or even having like the cooking class. So that really mentioned about different culture and how to understand and learn from different culture. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Danielle Harris online.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Nina and February, for your presentation. I just wonder through the council officers if any work could be done around looking at current facilities in Palmerston North that could perhaps be repurposed or used. Obviously, big budgets are needed to build special type hubs. We are a city with a growing multicultural population, and I just wonder if any work's happened in that space or could happen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll just get the Assistant CE to answer.
There is a program in the long-term plan to look at community places research to see what sort of policy approach that council may have in terms of looking at new community places. So that research is being finalised and officers are developing recommendations, and officers expect to be reporting that back through council before the end of this term.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dingwall, you got a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming in and talking to us about this today. I was just wondering a couple of things. One is around your the extra members that you've said that have joined recently. With the extra members, are you speaking about individual members or extra groups of members? So is that 20 people who have engaged with you, or is that 20, I guess, extra nationalities that have extra, national groups?
It's extra group members, so it's not individual. Yeah. So within those group members, there is some ethnicity, specific ethnicity, and some other groups, they are already kind of like the content in their group is already different nationality. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I was just wondering about the capacity that you have in your current space. If now that you've got the 9 staff, I'm aware that you do have that extra room there that you use for various events, and people can kind of hire that out. Is that getting much use at the moment, or is it? Do you have high demand for that room?
You mean within Hancock Community House?
Yes.
Yes. We've been hiring room wherever available within Hancock Community House. Yes, we've done that.
Yes. And so, are you seeing more people needing to hire the room, or are you finding that people are needing to hire other spaces in other community centres?
So, for example, some classes are held in the evening. Yeah, so we do help them if they are MMC members. So we subsidy, if they can only hire the one of the room at the Hancock Community House because the MMC room is already booked for something else. So so therefore it's always so much clash, because kind of like, oh no, we need the bigger one or we need a smaller one, so kind of like it's not that enough variation of the room for the group's needs.
So I guess I was just trying to work out whether you're seeing more of that over the last couple of years that we've been in COVID, or has that quietened down during the COVID period?
Yes, we did seen it. So since I come to the board 2020 in October, and then so from October 2020 until now, that's where the 20 groups members, join us. And so we also increase, I think now we have 7 different languages, and then unfortunately, because we don't have the space, so those language classes, they have to hire somewhere else. So which is kind of like we feel we can't accommodate their needs, and that's not good, because then they have to be somewhere else where they are actually, we would like to be there under MMC, if you know what I mean. So they have to hire somewhere else, like in the ETC building or something like that. So because also the classes is growing with the student, so that's part of the reason.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Nina and February, for the work you're doing with MMC and for being here today. Just a question, firstly, to understand a little more around the funding sources that you're accessing, and whether they can also support physical premises and kind of operating costs, or is it only sort of staff salary costs? What kind of range is available to you?
You mean the current funding?
Both current and prospective.
Okay. Well, the current funding, yes, for example, the MSD, because that's where we get the biggest funding at the moment. So then we managed to have hire for staff, and then that would be also including, hiring the extra space, and that's part of it. But for the plan in the future is that if we get, like, for example, like the land or the building itself from the city council, but then the DIA, they do have the fund to build, to help with the build. And then Ministry for Ethnic Communities also saying that they will be able to help with the fund if we're gonna develop some multicultural hub. So there will be, basically, it's not just the city council contribution, but it will be from DIA, from Ministry for Ethnic Communities. And we're also trying to figure out if there's any other government agency that would be able to help us.
Thank you. And my final question is just around the kind of preferences that you might have around location. I understand that with the civic and cultural precinct planning process underway, that's been kind of perhaps a natural place to look, but kind of did MMC kind of look broadly at where in the city would be best to be and draw any conclusions?
Yeah, we are thinking of, because most of the ethnic communities people, most of them, they are not driving. They can take the bus, so it would be nice if it's kind of like center located, which is kind of easy for them to be able to reach to the center. Great. And they will be a great place to be.
Cool, thanks for clarifying that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for coming in. Thanks, Nina. Just a quick question around, have you thought about going into a partnership with a school, like say something like QEC, and going into a partnership, potentially because they use their classrooms during the day, and potentially, like just as an idea?
Well, we do partnership with others, like I said, other our groups who's holding the classes because they couldn't get within Hancock Community House within MMC. So they are then, partnering with the ETC or with the ELP, But QEC that we haven't approached them. So that's a good idea. But then at the same time, again, this is kind of like, I think what I would say, the ethnic communities, they would like to have kind of like our own,
I understand it, but
yeah.
short term, just thinking
Yeah,
short term
yeah.
rather than long term.
That's why in the short term also that now we are hiring extra space, not just for the staff, also, offices, and also for the event, because this building is actually also within King Street, which is the old ELP building.
And one more question, Madam Chair. Have you got a strategic plan?
We are in the process of doing strategic plan, so it's done. So we just need to review a few more. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Councillor Butt has just hopped into the queue.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Nina and team. Just following Councillor Hapita's question, what is involved in the Welcoming Schools project?
Okay, the Welcoming School project is basically, it's not just MMC as a stakeholders, but we are also with the welcoming communities, PNCC, DIA, Global Parent Support, MMC, Ministry for Ethnic Communities, and Ministry of Education. So the project is that so we just hired the coordinator for this project, and she just started 2 weeks ago. So the idea is that for us, as the Multicultural Council, and also to bring more education-wise, to welcoming the multicultural student within the school, for the parents and teachers to understand more also about the multicultural within the school. So that was the idea, where then we will try to make kind of like welcoming pack, for student who's got the multicultural background, so they feel more welcome. And with this purpose, then kind of like, because I do believe, or we do all believe, that children is our generation, so they need to learn from when they're young on, about the multicultural, about the diversity. Therefore, then they grow to be tolerant to others. And that's the purpose of the Welcoming School project.
And I was just thinking whether can you involve the term Councillor Hapita used to share the resources of those schools, like getting access to their classrooms after hours and using their classrooms for your classes?
Yeah, that can be considered, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That seems to be the end of the questions. So thank you very much, Nina and February and Angel, wherever she's gone, for coming in and talking to us about how MMC has grown hugely over the last couple of years, and what your aspirations are for the multicultural community in the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. You can sit back in the public gallery now. Thank you. So I'm happy to move that the committee receive the presentation for information. Seconded Councillor Butt. And I'll open it up if there's any comment, please. So I'll just make a short comment myself. I've been aware of the huge growth and rapid growth in MMC over the last little while, and I was very keen that we as a council had a good view of what was happening, because things have really moved at pace. We've been aware, I think, for some time that there's been a gap in services for members of the multicultural community in the city, and MMC, in partnership with a number of government agencies, is really, really stepping into the gap, which I think is excellent. There is a need in terms of future planning to have adequate facilities, and I think, the team today have brought to our attention the fact that they are working out of quite limited premises at the moment, small office and a very small classroom doesn't really meet the needs of the communities at the moment. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're planning going forward. I know if the Mayor was here, he would be certainly very supportive. He's often mentioned the need for a multicultural hub in the city. So I think it's a timely presentation to have that at the front of our mind. So thank you for that. Sorry, the presentation was moved by me and seconded by Councillor Butt. If you can just change that. Thank you. Are there any other comments? LJ, not LH. No? Okay. We'll move to vote, and I'm told that the voting machines are now working, so let's give them a try. If you can vote, please, to receive the presentation. Sorry, can we get the right recommendation up? We've got the wrong one up. Okay, so we're voting to receive the presentation from the Manawatu Multicultural Council for information. Moved by me, LJ, and seconded by Councillor Butt. And if you can vote now, thanks. Are you doing the online voting, Sarah? Yeah, okay. Okay, that has passed unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 6, which is a memo from Peter Ridge, Senior Policy Analyst, around the supply of the sale and sale and supply of alcohol harm minimisation amendment bill. So I'll invite Peter to the table. Thank you, Peter. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You'll be very pleased to know I have nothing to add. Happy to take this report as read, as background.
Thank you. That's excellent efficiency, Peter. So I will open up for any questions. First in the queue, Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you would be able to give us a brief update on our own local alcohol policy, and perhaps if this bill was passed, what impact that would make to our current process?
So our current provisional LAP is still under appeal. That hasn't progressed any further. The expectation, I believe, is that the Auckland Council LAP, which is working through its own appeals process, will need to be resolved first before ALA would take any action on ours. As to your second question, Councillor, it's hard to know what impact this bill would have on our own appeals process, because the scope of the bill would effectively be amending the legislation. Whether that would have a retrospective element, I'm not sure.
So just to clarify, going forward, if part of the bill is to remove the appeals process, would that mean that whatever we agree as council would then be implemented as opposed to then having to wait for the appeals process?
As I said, I'm not sure how it would work in a retrospective way, whether it would retroactively apply to existing appeals processes. I suspect not, but it would have an impact for any future LAPs.
Thank you.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Peter. I know this is hard to talk about because we don't actually know what it's actually really going to look like, but just in terms of the paper you've put in front of us, and when it talks about the end of alcohol sponsorship of broadcasting sport, how would that impact on our current facilities that we've got? Does that have any impact on our current facilities going forward?
We haven't done any research on the impact of that proposal. The purpose here is simply to provide background on the bill as it stands, and to give an opportunity for Dr. Jackson to present about the bill and what they would like to see council support. So there's no analysis been done on the impact of the bill because at the moment it hasn't even been introduced to Parliament.
Okay, so my second question is around if we were had a big team wanting to come in and this bill came through and they had sports sponsorship, then would we not be allowed to have them coming in to the city?
It's not something I can easily answer, but possibly Dr. Jackson's presentation might make some of that clearer. Yeah.
Are they presenting today?
Yes, Dr. Jackson's here.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. So I will ask Dr. Jackson. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Peter, can you just tell me, the Auckland LAP, when did that originally when was that originally appealed?
I think, I wouldn't like to be quoted on this, 2017, possibly 2018. It's been a while. It's gone through several stages of appeal, through the High Court and the Appeals Court, and I think the next stage would probably be the Supreme Court.
And at what point do we expect that to be resolved?
Again, I would hate to speculate. It could be any time in the next 12 months or maybe longer. It's very hard to say.
So it could be a 6-year process?
For Auckland Council, yeah, it could be quite a long process. Yeah.
And similarly, we may also be affected depending on the outcome of that?
It's, again, hard to say, but once the decision has come in regards to the Auckland Council LAP, it would probably give strong direction to ALA in determining any future appeals, including ours.
Great, thanks Peter, very helpful. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Peter, just a question from me. Is the local alcohol policy the only thing that can be appealed in this way?
In some ways, yes. So most of our other policies, such as our dog control policy or our local approved products policy, don't have a built-in appeals process the way that the LAP does. So it is somewhat unique in that regard. Any decision of council can be challenged via a legal challenge, so that is applicable to pretty much anything the council decides. But the LAP is one of the few that has a bespoke appeals process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this report. So I'm not actually sure if you can answer this, but I'm going to try it anyway. Ballpark figure, how much do you think, total ballpark figure, appeals processes actually would cost our council? Like when we have to go through this whole appeals thing, how much does that end up costing us?
I really wouldn't like to venture a figure for that, councillor. It's not something we have explored in detail, but as you are no doubt familiar, legal counsel support can be quite expensive, depending on the complexity of the appeal. It could run to I don't want to put a number on it, but it could be quite large.
Okay, and I guess. Okay, I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Okay, thank you very much, Peter. So I'm happy to move that we receive the memo entitled Summary of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Harm Minimisation Amendment Bill, seconded Councillor Hancock. I will open up for any comments, but I would just say that we have got Dr. Jackson to do a presentation next, so you may wish to hold your comments until she has done her presentation. But if anybody wants to make any comments at this stage, you can do. No. Okay, there are no comments, so we will vote to receive the memo. Thank you. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us on to item 7, which is a presentation from Dr. Nikki Jackson. Welcome. representing Health Coalition Aotearoa, and you, Dr. Jackson is the Executive Director of Alcohol Health Watch. So that's on page 31 of your papers. So welcome, Dr. Jackson. As you would have seen from the other group, you'll have 10 minutes for your presentation. We normally use the traffic light system, so green for 7 minutes, orange for 2, and then red for 1. And I believe you've got a presentation, which I think Committee Administrator is just getting up for you now. So just check that you've got the microphone on, that you've got your green light.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So we'll just wait until the presentation comes up. Okay, over to you. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou te reo pōwhiri e hariana hou kua whaiwa o ki te tū me te kōrero. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you this afternoon. And I will have to talk quickly because I have to get to the airport, leaving around 2:30. The reason that I'm here, Madam Chair and councillors, is that in late April, on behalf of the Health Coalition Aotearoa, which I'm a member of, I sent a letter to all mayors and chief executives of councils around the country, urging them to support Corey Shortwick's private members bill and to call for the government to do a wide review of our liquor laws. I have to say the response has been phenomenal and quite overwhelming and heartwarming, and I have been to a number of councils around the country, like I am today, presenting on this bill. So Auckland Council passed it unanimously to, a precedent to support a private member's bill. 2 weeks later, that was followed by the Mayor in Christchurch, then the Whanganui District Council, and then unanimous at Hamilton City Council. We have another council debating it tomorrow, and then I'm off to other parts of the country towards the end of the month. There has been a groundswell of attention to call for change around alcohol. Look, I have presented to your LAP on a number of times, so you'll be very familiar with the data around alcohol consumption at the DHB, of which Palmerston North City represents about half of that population. Similar levels of hazardous drinking to the national population as a whole. In fact, significantly lower levels of hazardous drinking amongst your Māori male drinkers compared to the national population of Māori. As we expect a social gradient of hazardous drinking, more likely to see hazardous drinking amongst our drinkers living in the most deprived areas. For our women, 1 in 5 in this DHB are classified as hazardous drinkers. Where we see the inequities the greatest for hazardous drinking and harm is for women, particularly women by ethnicity and women by socioeconomic position. That's where the gaps are the largest. Māori women almost twice as likely to report hazardous drinking, and a huge social gradient between women living in the most advantaged versus the most disadvantaged areas. In Palmerston North, the Territorial Authority data, in fact, you've got a lower than national population rate of hospital admissions due to acute intoxication and due to chronic drinking. But that's just one harm. You'll be seeing harms such as violence and crime, road deaths, injuries, family harm, child maltreatment, alcohol abuse and addiction, poor mental health, suicide, dementia, 7 forms of cancer that we've heard today, heart disease, stroke, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, to name a few. And of course, there's a number of reasons why we have high levels of alcohol harm in this country, but the 3 biggest drivers lie in our environment. The fact that in 2019, alcohol was more affordable than ever before. Advertising is ubiquitous, and now it's uniquely targeted to individuals based on their emotions through social and digital media. And alcohol is highly available, whether it's from your local bottle store or even now from the comfort of your couch. And these inequities and harm that we see are driven by the fact that our lowest income neighbourhoods are disproportionately concentrated with these 3 strong drivers of alcohol use and harm. So finally, we have a bill in the biscuit tin that seeks to restrict the availability and advertising of alcohol. It's taken many years to see this. That's why we're here to urge you to support the bill, to actually change our environment so that future generations can grow up in a healthier environment, enabling them to drink less. So this bill does seek to remove the appeals process from local alcohol policies, to strengthen the criteria for district licensing committees to make decisions, and to end alcohol sponsorship of broadcast sport. We've got to go back to what we promised communities in 2010, The objective in our legislation was to improve community input into local alcohol licensing decisions. We owe it to communities for that objective to be realised. That was to be achieved through having local alcohol policies. It was to be achieved by having district licensing committees. And LAPs were enabled in November 2013, 8 years ago. Here we are, 35% of the population live in a TA with an LAP. Auckland commenced its LAP on May the 19th, 2015, over 2,500 days ago. We are 7 years in the appeals process. It goes to the Supreme Court in December, so you'll be waiting many more years until you see any decisions or changes. Hamilton gave up after spending more than $1 million. Wellington gave up. Christchurch spent more than $1 million because these lapses have been appealed predominantly by the supermarkets, also by the bottle stores, and our research showed that as you've watched these lapses get through the appeals process, the more and more track changes you saw in these policies. Why? Because they ended up being watered down, so they didn't have the protections for communities against the serious harms from alcohol. And I know that there's 4 appellants to the provisional lap for Palmerston at the moment. So we've been here before, an LGNZ remit saying that the current ability for appellants to endlessly challenge a community's preferences regarding the sale of alcohol is untenable, calling on the government to change. 95% support. So I've been with colleagues looking at all of the data of district licensing committees around the country, seeing if this promise was realised, that it was going to become harder to get a licence and easier to lose one. Well, I present this slide to all these councils around the country and it shows a similar picture. We're not seeing licences decline, and there's a number of reasons for this. Sometimes communities are so vigorous in their opposition that they can get the applicant to withdraw the licence, and that's what I urge communities to do. But when it gets to a DLC, often communities are struggling to have a say. So that's availability. And marketing. Well, we still have, rugby, cricket, and a number of our elite teams still sponsored by alcohol companies, multinational alcohol companies in New Zealand predominantly. And I was pleased to see when I looked at Manawatu Rugby and their social media presence. In fact, look at the number of sponsors that they have. And in fact, they don't have any alcohol brands as sponsors. They have a couple of bars and pubs. They're clearly not heavily reliant. The sky's not going to necessarily fall in if their sponsorship is taken away. And I have to say, their social media presence didn't have a strong alcohol focus, so kudos to them. So, it's estimated that around $21 million per year is spent on alcohol sponsorship. That was in 2014. Councils around the country now are ending alcohol advertising on their public transport. The Super Rugby women's teams this year made a commitment, except the Chiefs actually, to not accept alcohol sponsorship. We did it with tobacco. Endless government commission reviews, including the New Zealand Cancer Control Agency, the 20 DHBs last year, coming together collectively for the first time on a single issue, calling on alcohol harm to be reduced. So this is a no-brainer, and we've got ample public support nationally for changes around alcohol law reform, particularly wanting to see that marketing of advertising restricted. So lots of local councils are leading the way. They're supporting the bill. They're urging the government. Minister Farfoy has announced there will be a review to our liquor laws that will take place this parliamentary term. I urge you to call for a broad review that includes price, availability and marketing. And they're now going to their local MPs, asking them to sign up for their support for the bill. We need 61 MPs to sign up to the bill, and it can bypass the biscuit tin and be read straight away in the House. So you have the opportunity to make a huge difference. Alcohol has a huge impact on well-being, not just physical and mental well-being, but economic and social well-being. And by making these changes, it's not just about this generation, but it's generations in the future. So, kia ora and thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jackson. We'll open up for questions. What time do you need to be away by?
2:25.
Okay, all right. So if you want a question, you have to keep it short. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Jackson, for your really interesting report. I'm just interested in knowing about your claim in there that affordable than ever before. Is it really reduced price or what's something else
So the real price of alcohol has somewhat maintained the same level, but because our wages have grown faster than the inflation on goods, it means that wages can buy more alcohol today than they ever could. So, and if you look at the Health Promotion Agency does this research every few years, so they updated that in 2019. Again, this is the same as most other countries around the world. Affordability of alcohol is increasing. Been very much driven by wine. Both the real price of wine has come down over time, as well as the affordability has increased. So it's a real concern.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Jackson, for the presentation. Probably just had a question. Given the legislation as it currently stands, did you give consideration to the unintended consequences that this bill might have on, let's say, local clubs who rely on, sponsorship in order for the clubs to function?
It's a good question. So at the moment, this bill only extends to broadcast sport. It doesn't go down to grassroots sport. It's only that's broadcasted via usually television and other sorts of means. So it actually wouldn't have an impact on grassroots sports at this stage. However, we would be advocating that this bill is extended to grassroots sports. And what we're calling for is a replacement model, just like we had with tobacco. 5 years of funding to support these clubs. I'm a member of a squash club. We're looking for sponsorship. So what the Ministerial Forum on Alcohol Advertising Sponsorship recommended in 2004 was to support these clubs to identify alternative sponsorship. We can actually do it today. We can add 2 cents to a bottle of beer, 2 cents to a can of RTD, 6 cents to a bottle of wine, and 9 cents to a bottle of spirits, and we can buy out alcohol sponsorship right now. It's cents that we're talking about. Or we could use it from government coffers. So we're looking for a buyout of, say, $30 million a year. It's probably not even that in today's figures. Just like we did with tobacco, buy it out, give these clubs opportunities to replace that funding. So in Western Australia, they have bought out community-level Aussie rules clubs of alcohol sponsorship as a mechanism to improve men's mental health. They've invested in men's mental health by buying out alcohol sponsorship. They've replaced it with a health logo, which is getting huge brand awareness now in Western Australia. So it can be done. We did it with tobacco.
Thank you.
We've got the mechanisms right now. And if I may just reply to the question earlier, is there are exemptions in the legislation for international teams that come with alcohol sponsorship. So if it's a tour of something, then there is that discretion for the Director General and those to make that exemption.
Thanks. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Dr. Jackson. Just interested in your point around the private members bill as it relates to availability, and you speak of strengthening the criteria. Now, you may have hit it on the way through because you were moving at speed, but could you just briefly highlight what that strengthening of criteria for DLC commissions is about?
Yes, so there's 2 additional criteria. It's about looking at the current availability of alcohol in that local area and determining whether that is actually sufficient. Putting the onus back on, actually there's this number of bottle stores and off licences, and that would be sufficient for the local residents, for the population. The other one is to kind of look back and go, well, is this premises really for the benefit of the community? And, and putting it back on, is this what the community needs? Now, I would suggest that those 2 criteria, not potentially my priority criteria to strengthen Section 105 of the Act around the licensing criteria. I would love to see things in there about explicit mention of deprivation. That if there's a 8 to 10 deprivation and you're wanting to put an extra off licence, then there's an assumption that it's not going to be granted and that you would need to have to get over a higher hurdle to get that in. Or in communities with a high Māori population in relation to our tiriti obligations. I think there are other criteria I'd like to see in there, potentially more so than the 2 that are in the bill, but I think this is an opportunity to take it for debate, and let's have that debate.
Thank you. If there aren't others in the queue, I do have a follow-up.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Thanks. Just interested in your perspective around certainly what we've experienced here in Palmerston North is we've quite often had a kind of evidence deficit as cast within a very hyper-local lens. Does this bill do anything to address that deficit?
Well, it still means that you have to go through the same process to develop a local alcohol policy. So that criteria would remain the same in terms of looking at health indicators, your tourist population, your demographics, all those kind of things. And you still need to do that in partnership with the Medical Officer of Health and with police, we would hope with Māori communities as well. So that kind of evidence-based criteria would still be there to develop the local alcohol policy. Yeah.
Does this place any onus on the industry to be actively contributing to the evidence base?
This bill alone will not, no. In fact, we advocate that section, I think it is 397 of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, actually enables the government to demand sales data from the industry. And they had 1 year to give that sales data in 2013, and they didn't. I would like to see that measure actually implemented.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We do it for tobacco.
Thanks, thank you. So there's no more questions, so you're welcome to take a seat back in the public gallery until you need to go. And thank you so much for taking the time to come down and present to us today. Thank you. I will move that the committee receive the presentation for information, seconded by Councillor Hancock. And I also have an additional recommendation which effectively tests whether or not we do support the proposed private members bill. So I'll just get the administrator to put that up, please. So basically the additional recommendation is that it recommends that Palmerston North City Council supports the proposed private members bill, Sale and Supply of Alcohol Harm Minimisation Amendment Bill, which aims to reduce the special appeal process through local alcohol policies and wind down alcohol advertising and sponsorship of sports, and that we request the proposed private members bill, Sale and Supply of Alcohol Harm Minimisation Amendment Bill, is supported by the government and or non-executive MPs, and we request that the New Zealand Government review the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012. That's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Hancock. So I'll just speak to the second recommendation. These are similar recommendations that were passed by other councils, and the intent of them is to indicate our support as a council for this private members bill. I think as Dr. Jackson explained, if 61 MPs support the bill, then it doesn't have to wait to be drawn out of the biscuit tin. It automatically goes forward. And so the aim of our support here is to indicate to our local MP that we would request him to support the bill. I think I'm not going to make all of the arguments because I think they've been very well made today by Dr. Jackson, and to some extent the explanation that our own council officers have given us about the difficulty of actually getting a functional LAP. But to my mind, the power imbalance here is wrong. The power in this situation at the moment rests with the deep pockets of the supermarkets and the manufacturers of alcohol. And the community does not have equivalent power. And so despite councils all over the country putting forward local alcohol policies to try and limit alcohol harm, they're just regularly appealed. And as we've seen, the appeals get held up in the courts for years and years and years. Meanwhile, there's no local alcohol policy in place, and alcohol harm continues. And I think whatever the intent of this bill originally, it isn't achieving that aim currently. And so I certainly would urge you to support the removal of the appeals process, which is quite unique for the local alcohol policy, as no other policy has its own special appeal process. And remembering that we as City Council do have responsibility for public health and for the well-being of our community. So I will just leave it at that for now in the interest of time, and pass to others who wish to speak. So Councillor Naylor, you're first.
Thank you. I also strongly support us getting behind this bill for all the reasons that the Chair has outlined. All three of the major aspects, I think, are critically important to our ability as a community, as a council, to manage the harm in our community. And I think it was really clear in the submissions to our own local alcohol policy, you know, the amount of harm that is done by alcohol. And it was incredibly frustrating to me through that process when we perhaps identified some aspects of the local alcohol policy that we wanted to implement in order to minimise that harm, and we were really faced with a horrible dilemma to have to water it down for the purpose of trying to get it through the appeals process. And I think that goes against every principle that I would think that we should have as a council to be able to, you know, if we're going to be responsible for the social well-being of our community, we need to have the tools to be able to manage some of that risk. And when we have the tools to be able to have a local alcohol policy, but that is totally undermined through the appeals process, then it's really quite pointless. So I'm really delighted to hear about this potential action, and I'd really hope that it can be bypassed the ballot process and sped through. So very happy to get behind it 100%.
Thank you. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I won't be supporting it. And the reasons I'm not supporting it is because it's not clear about what it is yet. I mean, if it was clear, the paper that would have been put in front of us would have been quite clear, that was put forward by the officer. So I don't feel that we've got anything that's quite concrete, and it isn't concrete about what we're actually supporting. So I'm not going to be supporting this because we haven't actually got anything that's quite clear to be supporting. So I'm going to vote against this. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and I just want to thank Dr. Jackson for a very comprehensive presentation, and also to Peter for the paper. Yeah, I'm not going to go into any depth on this, but just to touch on a couple of points. One of the main planks, I guess, of this private members' bill is to broaden the criteria or considerations for district licensing committees. And of course, the example I will give of that is that that's around controlling the location and the number of off-licences in the vicinity of vulnerable locations. In other words, dealing with that density issue and of those vulnerable communities that were discussed earlier. The private members' bill will actually then provide a greater ownership and leverage for communities and also for local government. It will lead to safer, healthier communities where wellbeing is at the centre. The other thing which I think needs to be pointed out too is that social harm costs the New Zealand taxpayer $7.85 billion per annum. $7.85 billion per annum in alcohol harm. Lost productivity, injury, victimisation, criminal offending, unemployment, addiction, and unwanted health outcomes. So the gravity of this particular bill cannot be understated. I think, and finally, the private members' bill does provide an opportunity to better balance the needs of business and safeguard the health, the well-being, and the safety of our communities. So for those reasons, I urge you to vote for this. It's common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the Assistant Chief Executive would just like to make a comment around a clarification. Thanks.
Through the Chair, just to clarify what we would do as a result of if this recommendation passed, is that we would actually write to the New Zealand Government asking them to review the Sale of Liquor, Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, and indicating council support for the private members' bill. We'd also write to MPs asking them to support the private members' bill. I think A also implies that if such a bill did come through the process, that we would actually prepare a submission that would actually come back through this, through council.
Thank you. Danielle Harris online. Danielle, sorry, would you be able to just start again? We didn't hear the first part of what you were saying.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes, thank you.
I'm echoing on my end now. We'll see how we go. Alcohol, like tobacco, was used to take our land, and for us, it's been downhill ever since. So the impacts, are intergenerational, and I support all the comments that have been made around the table today. And if this is a small step towards the bigger steps then we need to take, then from Rangitani's perspective, we 150% support it. I could say a lot more, but a lot's already been said, which I support. Ngā mihi.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, thank you. It's just I will have a brief right of reply. I think it is quite clear what this private members bill is seeking to do, and the details of the private members bill have been very well outlined in the paper from officers. So I think it's quite clear what we're supporting or not, if you don't support it. And I think it's important that we send a message to government that the bill that they have left us with is just not really fit for purpose, that the current local alcohol policy legislation just doesn't provide us the means to do what it was intended to do. And I think these are not necessarily large actions, but if many councils across the country all do the same thing, then I think it will send a message both to MPs and the government that this is legislation that does need to be looked at again because it's just not achieving what it set out to achieve in the first place. So with that, I will ask you to vote. Is everyone happy to take 1 and 2 at the same time, or do you want them separated? Do you want them separated? Okay, so we need to have them separated, please. Yep, so we'll do this one first, the additional one first. I've already read it out once, so I'm not going to read it out a second time. So we're just voting on the additional recommendation now, please. And that is carried, 11 votes for and 1 against. Thank you. We'll now just take the first recommendation that the presentation be received for information. If you can vote now. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that takes us on now to item 8, which is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 9th of March. I'm happy to move that the minutes be received as a true and correct record. Seconded Councillor Hancock. Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes? No? Then I will ask you to vote, please. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 9 is a report on a recommendation to engage sector lead organisations. It was to have been presented by Stephanie Velvin, Community Development Manager, but I understand that she is away unwell, and so it will be instead presented by Anton Carter. So, kia ora, Anton, and when you're ready, thank you.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, talofa lava councillors and committee members. I would like to say nothing to add. It's my new line, but I'll just provide you with a brief summary of the memorandum that is before you. I'll take the paper as read. The memorandum provides staff recommendations for 7 organisations to become identified as sector lead organisations. All of the 39 successful strategic priority grant applicants were assessed against the criteria which is outlined in section 2.2 of the memorandum. I can update you that all 7 organisations have provisionally agreed to take part in this trial and are supportive of the intention of the sector lead process. This is a trial, and staff will work closely with these identified organisations to develop specific measures that are appropriate as a sector lead. The identified organisations will report directly to Council on an annual basis, and a final report of the trial process will come back to Council in time for the next LTP process, which will give enough time to make any changes or to progress with this mechanism and formalise it as a process. This is a new process, and I'd just like to acknowledge staff for the extra work done to get us to this point. I have nothing else to add.
Thank you very much, that's great. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Anton, for jumping in and for being brief. Just a couple questions. One, in terms of how this is being communicated from a kind of relationship management point of view, if there's 7 out of 39 that are now in this space, were there any of the balance, the 32 that were involved in discussions or that need some relationship support as these decisions are made public?
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor. I think it's ongoing relationships with all of the organisations. Some of them were disappointed not to be included. They would perceive themselves to be in that position. But as I said, we'd use the criteria to look at all the applicants. So while they may have missed a cut this time, I think it's definitely aspirational, and we will be supporting organisations that would perceive themselves to be in a sector-led role for the next round if it was to continue.
Thank you. That's helpful to know. So has that been generally communicated that there is a path toward the future for the 32 that aren't currently in that space? Not that all 32 would necessarily be there, but
correct.
You know, is there clear public information about a path?
There will be.
Great. Thank you.
Because this process isn't finalised. So once that's finalised, then there will be public information about the process and the steps that organisations could take in the future if they wish to be to be considered as a sector-led organisation.
Thank you. My other area of questioning is just around communication with the public and the kind of public-facing side of information around this. Will it be evident to members of the public either through our website or other mechanisms that we do have sector leads and sort of who they are and how to get in touch with them?
I think there's an opportunity for us to work with the marketing and communication team to look at ways that we can profile this. Of course, we'll be using our standard council mechanisms, but as you know, not everyone views that. So I think it's an ongoing thing over the next 3 years, perhaps, where we are taking the opportunity to communicate to people that there is a process, that there are these organisations that have taken on these new roles.
Thank you. I guess can I just clarify, perhaps through you, Madam Chair, given that we have some comms people in the room, kind of if they have any comment here around what they might see as opportunities with this new direction.
through the chair. Obviously, we use all of the channels available to us from the council, so our social media is very active. We have huge following on that, and obviously we would use that to promote anything like this. Also the website. We're also looking at I don't want to say newsletters, but e-memos that we can get out to communities, and obviously we do account management to the community area, so we would be working with them.
Great, thank you. So what I'm hearing there, or perhaps what I'm hoping to hear, is that it would be reasonably obvious to a member of the public that A, this has happened, and how to get a hold of these organizations.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Anton. Can you just clarify for me? I think when we agreed to the sector lead approach, there were somewhat less than 7 chosen organisations. Yes?
That is correct.
Okay. So my question really is just around, in terms of the SPG pool, now that's grown to 7 organisations. What steps are we putting in place to ensure that we don't, like the residual amount is actually managed? Is it going to cause us some issues in terms of the residual amount for the 32 other organisations who are not sector leads?
No, there's no financial implications with supporting this memo.
No, I'm talking about the organisations who might have had an expectation perhaps to be allocated a certain amount of funding, right? Now we've actually now got 7 organisations that have been grouped together as sector leads. They take all their funding from the SPG, so that leaves 32 organisations who are then left, I suppose, with the residual amount. So, are there any financial implications for those 32 organisations who are outside of that 7 group at the moment?
No, my understanding is there isn't, because it's the same pool for all the strategic priority grants. So we're not pulling them out, and they're not taking money away from those other groups that haven't been identified as a sector lead.
Right, thank you. That's the reassurance that I was looking for. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Anton, for this report. With the sector leads, I had sort of envisioned I guess, umbrella groups that look after many groups. And when I look at this list, I mean, that could be completely wrong, but when I look at this list, I note that there are a couple of sector leads that are also members of the Palmerston North Community Services Council. And I was just wondering what the rationale was for them being sector leads on their own.
My understanding is that each of the organisations supported obviously have their specific focus. So they could be also part of a broader group. But when we looked at it based on the criteria, they had a specific focus that we wanted to support, that meant that there was benefit to that particular sector.
But I'm just trying to work out what the difference of these sector leads is, as opposed to, I guess, the other 32 that didn't make the cut, because they all sort of fill some sort of criteria.
Yes, that is correct, Councillor. Specifically, and we're pulling from the support and funding policy. So we've had, as I said, under section 2.2. So while some of these organisations may have, they may contribute to their sector, what the criteria really made us look at was their strategic outcomes, their priorities, strategic business planning, and having those things already in place. So you would tend to see organisations that were more experienced and that had already had a good strategic plan and a good business plan in place. And if we're thinking about it as a continuum, I think you're right. There are some organisations that could be ready to be in that position, but according to the criteria and the process that we followed, they weren't there yet. And as Councillor Barrett was saying, that would be to identify them and support them so that they could move along the continuum.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. There are no further questions, so thank you, Anton. I forgot to give you your title when you came up, Group Manager, Community Services. Thank you for stepping in while Stephanie's away.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have the recommendation, which is that Council engages the following sector lead organisations through partnership agreements for the period 1st of July 2022 to 30th of June 2025. A, Creative Sound Society Inc. B, Environment Network Manawatu. C, Housing Advice Centre. D, Palmerston North Community Services Council. E, Manawatu Multicultural Council. F, Square Edge Community Arts. And G, Te Tihi Uruhini Whānau Ora Alliance on behalf of Ora Connect. So I'm happy to move that, and Councillor Barrett will second, and I will open it up for any comment. Thank you. So I'll just start myself by saying that I do appreciate the work of staff to get this up and running so quickly, given that, we only we particularly wanted it in place for the start of this next SPG round, and I think staff have worked hard to get these agreements up and running to coincide with the 1st of July for the start of the next SPG round, which I think will be very helpful in helping us to evaluate how well this change process is working before the next long-term plan. And so I'm grateful for that, and I'm hopeful that the new arrangement will be useful both to the organisations themselves, but also to Council, particularly with some of the direct reporting that we'll receive. And I think it'll make us more aware of what's happening in the community sector and encourage best practice. So I'm very supportive of this as a whole. Doesn't look as though anyone else wishes to comment. Last chance. Okay, so we will vote then, please. And that is carried, 13 votes for and 1 abstention. So we will now take a break for 15 minutes for afternoon tea, and we will come back at 3 o'clock for the rest of the agenda. Thanks. So, kia ora anō. We are back with Community Development Committee, and we are on item 10, which is the residence card, presented by Donna Baker, Head of Marketing and Communications. So, welcome, Donna. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the report as read, but I do have some comments I'd like to make to put the report in context, and I probably won't be as brief as Anton, so please bear with me. First of all, I'd just like to state that I understand that the idea for the voucher or a residence card was originally considered in May of 2020 as a result of the local retail and service sector being hit hard due to the consumer purchasing restrictions due to the COVID lockdowns. There's no denying that COVID has had an adverse impact on our economy and on our residents, and we certainly haven't been immune to that, but the latest economic report for December 2021 for our region, the quarter compared to the same time in 2020, showed that the GDP in the Manawatu Whanganui region increased by 7.6% compared to the national increase estimated at 2.8%. Our electronic retail spending increased by 6.5% in Horizons Northwest and 8.7% in Horizons Southeast compared to the national spending declining by 0.4%. And our job seeker benefit numbers across the wider region also declined compared to the rest of New Zealand. Now, none of this negates the impact that COVID's had on our communities, but it was taken into consideration when we looked at this report. We undertook desktop research to see what other councils have similar schemes, and there were actually limited examples. What I did find was that most of the examples were around leisure activities. For example, New Plymouth has entry to the Govett Brewster Gallery, which is free to residents with proof of address. CCOs in Tauranga and Christchurch have discounts for hot pools, and the most information that we could find was actually around the Wellington City Council, which has the leisure card. That provides 20 to 50% discounts on council facilities, mainly rec and swimming pools, and concession rates at Wellington Zoo and Zealandia. The card is not available to all residents. They must be getting support from specific organisations or have a community services card. There are less than 4,000 users of that card, and it costs over $50,000 a year for administration. There was another local card in Queenstown, which isn't a council initiative, and that businesses opt in to provide a discount for that, and it costs $49 per annum. We explored the history of the Destination Manawatu residence card, which effectively ceased in 2017, and CETA advised that they believed that the reason that this was not a success is that it was resource intensive and it didn't get much take up. And the barriers they suggested was the lack of paid attractions that could be discounted, the fact that the three museums were more of a one-off experience rather than attracting regular repeat visitors, and the offering was only for free access for a resident when attending with a paying guest. The Chamber's views on the card are expressed in the paper, and when we made the recommendation in this report, we did consider what was already on offer from the council, including our libraries, wild base and under 5 swimming being free. We looked at the history of the Destination Manawatu residence card. We took in account the view of the Chamber, and so based on that, and the fact that Council indicated that the initiative would need to be delivered within existing budgets, we've made the recommendation not to pursue the residence card at this time. Happy to take any questions so I can.
Thank you for that. We do have some questions. First up, Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Donna. Just a question around the Palmy companion card and how that fits in with a residence card. What's the difference between a residence card and a Palmy companion card?
I can't speak to the companion card, Cheryl, do you know?
It's on the City Council's website, and it's to do with a disability card that people get free entry into the City Council's venues.
Councillor, the Assistant Chief Executive can answer the question.
The difference, and through you, Madam Chair, the difference with the companion card is just along the lines that you're explaining, Councillor Hapeta, where someone can get access to venues such as the Regent Theatre if they're accompanying someone with a disability, that they actually get free access. So it's a different purpose than a residence card, which is looking at getting discounts where discounts can be obtained.
So, Donna, we're looking to get rid of the companion card as well?
No.
Sorry, Susan, are you commenting? No. Okay, so you're not looking to get rid of that?
No, that hasn't been considered.
So you're just looking to get rid of the residence card?
There is no residence card at the moment.
Okay. So when you're looking at the companion card, have you talked to residents about what is the residence card or the companion card so people know what the difference between the two are?
I certainly haven't had an opportunity to do that.
Okay.
I mean, I can explain that I've picked this up later in the piece, and I'm still coming up to speed, but certainly a residence card would be, I know that when it was looked at in 2020, it was looked at being available to all of ratepayers, and they were talking about 30,000 being printed. The cost for that was around $70,000. That would be... would have to have people, the council facilities and other businesses offer up discounts. One of the things that was taken into consideration was from the Chamber, which said that they weren't supportive of asking businesses to give discounts at this stage.
But if we were just looking at a residence card that had an incentive program of some kind that wasn't necessarily of that ilk, but it was a residence card of some kind, because we've already got a companion card that comes from the council, so we were looking at a card, because it's already a discount card. I'm just sort of saying we're already offering something already. Sorry, Karen, I mean, I know you want to comment, but at the end of the day...
Councillor, can we just stick to questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just got people sighing all around me. It is hard.
Okay, let's just focus on questions, thanks.
Okay, so when we have these cards and we have got them offered, so we say we don't want the residence card, but we do want other cards. So that's what I'm trying to say. We've got a difference between cards for different peoples in our society. That's what I'm just trying to distinguish between the two different groups.
The Assistant CE would like to answer that question, Councillor.
The scope of the report was to do with investigating a residence card only, so the scope of the report does not cover the companion card, nor does it actually give any recommendations about discontinuing that companion card.
So my next question is, when are we going to ask the residents of our community what they want?
If the council decides that that's what they would like us to do, we could run a survey. There's obviously costs associated with that, and we would need to come back to council and report around what resources we would need to do that. We certainly don't have anything in our work program at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Donna.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Donna. Just in terms of the analysis of options, there's quite an explicit comment around the Manawatu Business Chamber and Palmy bid both not supporting the card. That's quite clear. And there's sort of some reference to CEDA's views on aspects of the card, but is CEDA's position that they don't support it either?
Yes, when I spoke with CEDA, they indicated that, and they sent me the Dropbox of all of the information that they had, that they felt that there were barriers to the card, they felt that it was administrative heavy, that there was very little uptake because the offer is not very wide, because we don't have many activities to offer, and so they weren't supportive.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Donna. 2 questions, if I may. My understanding, the cost of producing the card and the administration fees, I know when we were talking about the parking exemption card and other cards that I'm familiar with, there's a cost of around $20, $15 to $20 per card. Is that around your understanding?
So as I indicated, I haven't done a cost analysis based on this report, but on the basis of the report that was presented to you in 2020, the print for 30,000 cards being done externally, which was actually cheaper than internal, was estimated at $78,000 for the 30,000 cards.
That's just the print for the cards, though.
That is for the cards.
That's not the process.
No, that's not the administration.
Yeah. So if we looked at sort of like the process for the the super card, that's about $10 and they've put that up to $20. Anyway, that's fine, I'll comment on that. Now, the other thing is I wasn't aware of any submissions during the annual plan of people. This has been discussed quite often in council. Has there been any submissions come through the annual plan for?
No.
I wasn't, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we were to have a card that was available to all the residents, would that have would we have been able to gather a bit more data on exactly who was using all of the different I guess facilities that we end up having? Because I think one of the appeals I had of a card is giving us more clear data on who actually uses each of the different, I guess, facilities and things, as opposed to, you know, out-of-towners who come in and use those facilities. Like, would that give us that kind of info?
It would depend on the type of card. If you went for an electronic card, it would obviously be much more expensive than we've been talking about just printing a card. And there would be software and hardware that would need to be bought for that. So that would be a major conversation that the council would have to have. The examples that I saw around the country of councils using proof of residence is mostly where they have a letter which shows their address and they get access through that. The issue then is that the facility that is allowing that then has the administrative burden of identifying those people, recording that so that that information could then be presented back to us to understand how many people are using it. I do know that the pools do a survey and from that, we know that between 80 and 90% of the people that use those pools are local. I don't have the figures, the numbers of people that covers, but I do know that there are a lot of people that use those facilities. But again, that's under contract, and if council decided that they wanted to go down that sort of route, that would be a variation to contract and obviously a policy decision around for council.
My second question was around who you've engaged with when doing this report. So you've spoken to CEDA and the business community. Have you spoken to anybody in the community sector, like the Palmerston North Community Services Council or the Volunteer Centre, and how they would fit into, or what their thoughts on a residence card would be?
No, I haven't done that. As I said, I looked at what other councils were offering to see what the offers were, and spoke to the 2 organisations that were indicated to me that had a history in this card and understood the history of what had happened. So that's as far as my investigations have gone. If council wanted us to take it further, we would need to consult, and there would be a resource requirement around that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of questions, so thank you very much, Donna.
Thank you.
Now, I'm happy to move the recommendation in the agenda that council resolves not to pursue a residence card at this time. seconded Deputy Mayor. And there is also an additional recommendation, I believe, from Councillor Harpeter. So if we could see that, please. And Councillor Harpeter, do you want to speak to your recommendation?
Thanks, Madam Chair. The reason why I'm putting this up is more around finding out what residents think. And I don't mind if it's just a random sample of residents, not all of the residents across Palmerston North. So it's, 5,000 or 10,000, whatever the random sample is of residents across the city is put into a survey to keep the costs down. But really it's to find out what their preference is. I mean, I've got no objection to a Palmy companion card. I don't want anyone to think that I do have that, but it's for people to know what is out there on offer, to people know that there is a Palmy companion card, for people to know that there potentially is a residence card and what is in a residence card. I think people don't know what we could potentially have to offer and what a residence card potentially is. I mean, what a residence card in the past was, it was an incentives card, and it was used for trying to entice tourists into our city and trying to get them to our attractions. And that's what it was for the Lido, it was for the Rugby Museum, and it was for basically for our venues. And it was trying to get more tourists into our city. And so it really is a tourism thing. So that's really what it's about. It's not necessarily about trying to get more business, it's more about getting more tourists, and that's trying to do that attraction. So, if this doesn't get through, I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, but I'm just trying to say it'd be just nice to get some information so that we can find out what the people in our community want. That's all I'm trying to do by running a survey. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll just get the Assistant Chief Executive to comment around resourcing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if this passes, we'd want to have the opportunity to bring back a request for resources to actually support the implementation of a survey. At this stage, we can't sort of anticipate what that might be.
Okay. Comment from Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who to ask this question. Can I ask that?
Sorry, Councillor, I think we're really in comment. Oh. Or did you want to ask a question of the mover?
Yeah, it's a question from the mover, because by the look of the recommendation, it seems that it was moved by the community and we are going to abandon it. So I just wanted to know whether it was initiated by the council itself or by the public.
Sorry, who are you addressing that to staff or to the mover?
To the mover.
Councillor Harpeter, did you want to answer that?
Staff. Should go to staff.
Okay, I'll get Assistant Z to answer then.
My understanding that this recommendation was a recommendation from the council. The extent of our investigations be limited by the resolution to do this within existing budgets.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. I think this report does give some good basis for that suggestion, and I think with any idea we do need to consider the cost and the benefits of any initiative. In terms of the second recommendation, I won't be supporting that primarily because of what's outlined in 3.6 of our papers on page 42, where the Manawatu Business Chamber and Palmy BID have indicated that they're happy to support and in some instances lead other promotional initiatives. So I think that any sort of survey, if the Palmy BID or the Chamber thought that that was an initiative that they would like to see happen, then perhaps that's something that they could investigate what residents' views might be and what the uptake might be. Obviously, anything that a residence card, anything that someone's going to get cheaper is going to have to be paid for by someone. And I think that's why we just need to be a little bit cautious at this time of pushing forward with an initiative that might actually be more costly than what it's actually going to achieve in terms of benefit.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'm happy to support the first recommendation, but I do have some problems with the second recommendation, purely on the basis that, as that is worded, I think it would be very hard to actually build the criteria into any survey. You know, we would probably just get a multitude of answers across, you know, the surveyed group, which may not necessarily be helpful at the end of the day. So, for that reason, I won't support the second recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just happy to support that we don't pursue as the recommendation in the report. My recollection is this was after the first lockdown in 2020 that we explored a whole bunch of possibilities, and one was like the community grants that they could come and apply for to assist them to get through, which works reasonably well, and we've continued. Where this was just another one to explore, and so it was a council suggestion. It wasn't brought up from the community to come and say, let's do it. And I think the rationale not to advance it's pretty clear. So to go back out and do a survey, I think that just is a mixed, confused message. I think as a council, we just got to also stay in our lane. I think there's Palmy Bird, there's the Chamber, there's Cedar, that are doing all these economic development focus, and I think we should support their initiatives, not try and lead their work, and so I think it's pretty clear from my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question of clarification to the mover.
Yep.
Just wanted to know, Councillor Hopeta, if you had an intent around that being reported back to Council? Would you be happy with language that reflected that?
Yeah, sure.
So are you wanting to put up an amendment, Councillor Barrett?
If we can just change it, Sarah, to reported back. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Pedrinas? Okay, thank you. Did you want to make a comment, Councillor Barrett?
Briefly, I don't see really any great harm in asking residents what they might be interested in. You know, we're not trying to design the survey here. I don't think we're actually limiting anything by asking the chief executive to undertake this, and I think it's actually a great chance to actually collaborate with organizations like CEDA and Palmy Bid that could then actually inform a survey and could possibly be helpful in the commissioning of it. So I think it's great. I love getting feedback from the community, and this would be a way to do it.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first comment is just to clarify that this is actually an alternative motion if the first motion fails.
No, I did clarify that with the mover. She said it was in addition to.
Oh, I understand that might be the mover's intent, but in terms of process, this actually contradicts the first recommendation, because if the council resolved to not pursue a residence card, then why would we go and engage with the community on a residence card when we're not going to do it regardless of what they say?
It says at this time. So what we would be voting on with the first recommendation is that we don't pursue it at this time, but we take a survey. If this were to pass, we would then do a survey with residents, potentially about pursuing one at a future time. So I don't see them as contradictory.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I will support the officer's recommendation. I think there's a very clear case in terms of the value, and there is not a huge level of value that we would get out of doing a residence card at this time. The fact that it's quite labour intensive, there would be additional budget required, there will be additional budget required to go and do a survey. I'm not supportive of that at this time. In terms of the additional recommendation, I won't support that, because I think that the points made around this being an opportunity for tourism, I absolutely would acknowledge that if we would we were exploring opportunities to bring people into the city, then that would be worthy of a conversation. But a residence card wouldn't promote tourism, because a residence card would be for residents, it wouldn't be for visitors to the city. So if we were trying to attract visitors to the city, then we would need to be focusing on outcomes that would align with that. But I don't believe that recommendation does that, so I won't support it.
Councillor Dingwall.
Chair. I really like the idea of a residence card, mainly because I like the idea of having a card that kind of tells us what it is actually that residents are using in our city and what they might like to use more of, and you know where the needs end up being. And I like the idea of having discounts and stuff that we could offer to volunteers, or those kind of things. But when I look at this report, I do have to agree with the officers that maybe now is not the right time to be doing this, given all the dramas we've gone through with COVID, given the immensely tight budget we have been fighting over the last few weeks. And I really don't think now is a good time to have additional budget for a survey when we know that now is not the right time to do a residence card. So I think if you're voting for one, then having the second one happen, it does feel like you're leading people up the garden path a wee bit. So at this point, I would be supporting the first recommendation and not the second recommendation, purely on budget, because now is not the right time to be spending this kind of money. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Habter, back to you for right of reply.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. Thanks for all the feedback and comments. Really appreciate it. Really, this was about just trying to say that the residence card, or incentive card rather than residence card, incentive card is trying to attract people to Palmerston North from our outer region, and having attractions like the Gorge Walk, like all things that we've got in this beautiful city, so we can attract people here. It's an incentive card. So, and what I was trying to put on the table was something along those lines. So doing a survey to ask people what they think of it was what it was about. So that's all I want you to do, is think about that, not much more than that, and don't go too deep. So please give me your support. I'd love it. Thank you.
Okay, so I know some of you have spoken to the first recommendation as well, but what we will do is we will vote on this additional recommendation first. So we'll just vote on this one on its own, please. And that has failed. 4 votes in favour and 9 against. So we'll now take the first recommendation that Council resolves not to pursue a residence card at this time. I'll just briefly speak to it. A number of you have made good points. I think I agree most with Councillor Dennison, who commented that this was an idea, one amongst many, that we tossed around when COVID struck, as a means to support our business community primarily. And it's become clear that actually economically we're doing quite well as a region. The figures that I saw this morning, I think we were the third region in the country in terms of growth. So it seems that this isn't a necessary development at this time to support local business. And on top of that, we are under some budgetary constraint on our own admission, and so I'm not keen to pursue something unless there's a clear benefit, because there definitely would be a cost. So I'm happy to support the recommendation of the officers that we don't pursue the card at this time. I will open it up for anyone else to comment that didn't have a comment before on this recommendation if they want to speak. Okay, so no one else wants to speak, so that's fine. We will now vote, please. And that is carried, 12 in favour and 1 against. Brings us to item 11, which is the Safe City Portfolio Update, presented by Councillor Hancock. Councillor Hancock, did you wish to make some comments on your report?
No, Madam Chair, that's, I'm just happy for the report to be taken as read, just really highlighting the three matters in the summary there, which really is sort of the key messages, I guess, from the report. So I'm happy to move that the committee receive the Safe City Portfolio Update Report, June 2022.
Thank you, and I'm happy to second. Are there any questions for Councillor Hancock on his report? No. Okay. So we will vote to... Oh, are there any comments on the report? Sorry, I've opened for question, not comment. No comments. Right, we will vote to receive the report. Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Item 12, which is the Neighbourhoods, Villages and Rural Portfolio Update by Councillor Petrinas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just comment that it's wonderful to have the Bunnythorpe Community Centre open. It was opened in October 21, but it hasn't had a formal opening yet until we get a different COVID setting. But it was used at the Anzac Day ceremony, and the actual community did enjoy having such a nice facility. If councillors want to see what it looks like, it's online, and we'll give you details as to the size and the important thing that it is future-proof for expansion into the future. The other things that were discussed at the actual community meetings were really the freight hub update, which is a significant issue in that particular part of the world. In Ashurst, a lot of traffic calming measures have been completed, but I am most surprised to see the volume of traffic that is passing through that community, well over 5,000 vehicles a day. In Milson and Highbury, the pedestrian thresholds have been completed, and that's wonderful because it's reducing the actual through traffic speed. In particular, the Fears Road threshold by the school has made a big difference, and was a long time coming, but it's great to have it there. But apart from that, other issues were the actual Hokowhiru community meeting that was held last week, that Councillor Brent Barrett and Pat Hancock and Councillor Johnson and the Mayor and myself attended, and that's now going to go from strength to strength, so it's good to see that's in a positive form.
Thank you. You're happy to move your report?
Yes.
Okay, I'm happy to second. Are there any questions or comments on the report? No? Then we will vote to receive it. Thank you. Can everyone just check they've voted, that their votes have gone through? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So item 13 is the portfolio report for people and community, which I'm happy to move, and Councillor Hancock will second. And I'm happy to take the report as read and just ask if anyone's got any questions or comments. Okay, we will vote to receive the portfolio update for people and community. And that's carried unanimously. Item 14 is the portfolio update for Whānau Ora Health and Wellbeing. Councillor Meehan online. Councillor Meehan, did you want to speak to your report? Hang on, we'll just get you up on the screen before you start. Yep, go ahead.
No, nothing to add, Madam Chair. I'll just move the Whānau Ora Health and Wellbeing portfolio be received.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Harpiter. Any questions or comments on the report? Councillor Barrett, you in the queue for a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief question around the summary. The third dot point there talks about mobility scooters initiatives and alludes to perhaps suboptimal uptake there. Just wondered what evidence there is around that and what, if anything, specifically we might be encouraged to do as council.
So that's to Councillor Meehan, is it?
Or whoever can comment on it that's in that portfolio.
Did you want to comment on that question or respond to that question, Councillor Meehan?
That was actually from Councillor Naylor, so I would pass that back to Councillor Naylor.
Okay. Councillor Naylor, would you wish to respond to Councillor Barrett's question?
That was my comment, not based on any actual statistic or data, but based on that people that I've spoken to in the community don't appear to know that that service is available, and particularly those in the disability community who might benefit from it. So it's just anecdotal, really, in terms of the people that I've spoken to, and just everyone I have spoken to thinks it's a great idea, but and I'm glad that comms are here in the room, I just think perhaps it's one of those great ideas that more of our community might benefit from if they know about it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's vote to receive the report then, please. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us on to our last item, which is the committee work schedule, item 15. And I'll just hand over to the Assistant CE for some comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only comment I'd like to make is in relationship to the last item, which is around the companion card. And just to let you know, while that was due to be reported back to this committee in June, due to the impacts of COVID, the team will need to extend that trial because there isn't enough evidence to be able to bring back a report around the feasibility. The impact of COVID has been twofold. One is on the number of events that have been able to be held, But the other impact is really on the most vulnerable sector that this card is anticipated to assist, and the hesitancy around attending events through this time. So the recommendation is to actually have this reported through in 2023 so that the trial can be appropriately assessed.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Two questions from me. Firstly, on that item that the Assistant CEO has just mentioned, can I just check, there was $10,000 allocated to support that program. Will that be accommodated in the coming year for the trial to continue?
It is a good question. I'd need to actually check with the team on that and actually get back to you with perhaps an answer through email to elected members to let you know what actually happens with that 10,000. As you know, they're usually allocated to financial years and operational budgets and not carry forward. So I'll get back to you with an answer. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. And just secondly, just to close the loop on another piece of work in the disability space, the accessibility assessment, that we've had a program for that in this current financial year. Is there any intended reporting back on that program?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would imagine that if an assessment has been undertaken, there would be a report back to Council. If you wanted to really be clear around that, then I would recommend that you actually move a recommendation to include it in the work schedule.
Okay, thank you. Done that.
Okay, thank you. No further questions? Councillor Naylor, you've indicated that you want to move a recommendation to add that report to the work schedule, I believe.
Yep. Can I just
Do you want
quickly
to speak to that now?
Yeah. On both points, really. That last one, I support the deferral of measuring the effectiveness of the companion card. Obviously, there has been. I'm quite aware of the limitations in rolling that out due to the COVID environment, but would really support that small amount of funding to be included in the, if it's not already included, to be included in the coming year. My understanding is that we've only used a very small amount of that allocation. Well, the disability community have only used a very small amount of that allocation, I should say. But to my second point, and I'll pop a recommendation, the recommendations in front of us. It's just really to close the loop. It's this is a program that was supported and is being implemented in this financial year. I think it would be good for a report to come back to inform us of the progress and the outcomes of that program, and so that we have an understanding of what would be planned for, or what the next steps would be that arise from that assessment.
Thank you. Is there any comment either on this or anything else in the work schedule? Okay. Are we all happy to take this and the work schedule together? So, in other words, to receive the work schedule for June 2022 and the additional recommendation that the Chief Executive report back to the Community Development Committee on the progress and outcomes of Programme 2041. Nobody needs those separated? Okay. So we will vote on those two together then, please. Just in a moment we will. Yeah, thank you. So we'll take the two together. And that has carried unanimously. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of Community Development Committee. Nō reira, ina mana, ina reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So we'll just have like a 5-minute break to change over to resume planning and strategy.